I start the scene. They sent the fairies away. And I just hear from offset, cut fairies.
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 Fairies?
Like berries. Fairies.
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 7 takes, and then you just hear him, fuck it, action.
Welcome to Meetings That Changed My Life, where I sit down with creative duos to hear how their initial meeting turned into a collab that impacted culture. On today's meeting agenda, I'm sitting down with the legendary horror couple, Mike Flanagan and Kate Siegel, to dig into their careers.
I felt like my art was respected.
She was a stunning presence in the room. She was a stunning talent in the room. And you could tell from her first read that it's like, wow, she's a star.
I'm your host, Bimma, and this meeting is now in session. What's going on, y'all?
Oh, hey.
How y'all feeling?
Really good. Really glad to be here.
I'm just fascinated kind of with this scenario of couples and folks in relationships that also work together and have been working together for years, and what that dynamic's like. Kate, I want you to tell me a little bit about how you got into the horror genre to begin with.
As an actor, I struggled with auditions. It puts me in a real fight or flight state. I don't like to be judged in that way, so I got a lot of rejection, and because I'm a super sensitive duck, I started getting panicky whenever I did auditions. And that translated really well into horror auditions. Because I would come in authentically terrified.
Yeah.
It was like my natural state of being. It took me like 8 years to get comfortable in front of a camera. Wow. And that's when I started booking other work that wasn't horror. But it was such a good in for me because I could just be where I was, which was deeply terrifying.
What was it about the audition that you felt like it was like maybe condensing who you could be?
When I showed up in LA, as some actors do, I lacked a core of who I was. And so I was very interested in you telling me who I was.
Got it.
And your judgments of me. And so auditions carried this outsized weight where, like, if they told me I was good and I won, I was like, I'm a good person. And if it didn't go well, I'm a terrible person. Yeah. It just tickled a really nasty part of me.
I could totally understand it, how those things just sit with you, especially if you don't know who you are or who you want to be. So you start carrying all these other narratives that people are carrying around. It worked for horror.
Yeah, it did.
Mike, well, tell me about you. Were you always drawn to horror?
Well, it kind of the opposite. I was terrified of horror as a kid. I couldn't watch it. When I would go to friends' houses and they were watching anything scary, I would either watch through my fingers or I'd pretend to be sick so I could go home.
Oh, wow.
And
so you just leave the house?
Yeah, I was really embarrassed because a lot of my peers really liked scary movies and I couldn't do it. I was like, okay, I can't do the movies, I'll start reading scary books because that'll be easier because I can control it because it's just in my head. Yeah. And the opposite is true. It's much scarier in your imagination than it is in a movie. But I didn't know any better, and I started reading. Stephen King was a big one for me. I gradually figured out that if I could make it through a scary part of the book, or a scary scene in the movie, or the whole movie, I was getting a little bit braver in these very controlled intervals. I felt like that courage carried out into my real everyday life, and I was less afraid of interacting with people or of my peers. Then I became really difficult to scare. And I owe that all to horror.
What was the scenario in which you two met?
I'd made this independent horror movie, my first kind of horror feature that was a crowd-funded Kickstarter movie that we shot in my apartment. And Kate had seen it because we had mutual friends in an acting class that you were in.
Yep.
I was getting ready to make my second movie, a movie that never got made, a movie that was a terrible title. It was called Scare Dares. And
it was a different time.
It was a different time. And we were casting up this little independent movie. And I had seen Kate in a play called The Heidi Chronicles and thought she was incredible. And so we invited her to come audition.
What were you thinking when you got this invite and this audition?
Oh, I was a huge Mike Flanagan fan. Absentia is a great film made for very little money. And when you see a director just grab that by the horns and just ride it off into the sunset, I think any actor feels a real magnetic pull, like I could get a piece of that. At that point, I was very excited about the audition. I was very excited to get to work with Mike Flanagan. Yeah. Somebody had slipped me the script for Scare Dares. And I started reading the script in my car, and I didn't stop. A lot of directors in an audition have a lot on their minds. And they'll say things like, I knew in the first 3 seconds, right? They've decided. And the rest is noise. Mike was respectful and dialed in and interested.
Yeah.
And he was interested, like he said, he was interested in how the scene went. He was there to learn, which is wild. Other directors are looking for somebody to deliver what they've pictured.
Right, what they have in mind.
Yeah, and Mike was like, I wonder what she'll do. What do you do with this scene? Like, what is this scene? How is this scene working? And he brings that into rehearsal up until today. And so that energy was overwhelming in a wonderful way. And then to be brought back in and to be working the script. And then again, I felt like I was part of something.
Yeah, you felt like a collaborator.
Yeah, I felt like my art was respected.
Yeah.
And so I was just so amazed by the level of kindness he brought to a process that can be very sterile.
She came in and Kate was stunning on the way into the room. You know, like just from she was a stunning presence in the room. She was a stunning talent in the room. And you could tell from her first read that it's like, wow, she's a star.
Yeah.
And I think you had finished your scene and were leaving.
Yeah, I left.
And we were like, get her back here. And the producer ran out and chased her down.
Yeah.
And brought her back in. And we were pulling things that were not part of the audition. It was just other parts of the script to see what Kate would do with it. And I remember vividly giving her a scene that she had not prepared and that was not part of the audition pile, just because I wanted to see what she'd do. Because Kate's instincts when it comes to this stuff fascinate me. And her initial instinctual approach without any direction or anything else is always wonderful.
When the audition was over, we didn't want to stop. Like, we wanted to keep doing
going.
the scene.
Yeah.
We wanted to keep digging in. Sidebar.
Yeah.
I did not get the Scared Ears job.
Yeah, the first audition she didn't get cast. Yeah.
Like, he's very complimentary, and I feel
You didn't get it.
But I did not get it.
And that movie never got made.
Right, but it was.
Did it make it feel better?
Yeah.
Did that make you feel better that it didn't?
No.
No.
I mean, because I didn't get the part. Like, it was cast.
Yeah.
It wasn't
Yeah.
that, like, there was no
It was
cast.
down to Kate and one other actress. So she made the top two.
Oh my God.
This is like, so like on one hand, I'm like, he's so kind. The things you
No, but
say
it's
are
true.
so
And
great.
then on the other
But I'm
hand, you're
what
like-
the?
In 3 words, what was your first impression of Mike?
Intimidating, kind, smart.
What would those 3 words be today?
Best friend forever.
What do you think Mike's first impression was of you?
Greatest actress ever. I bet he thought I was hot. I think he was excited to see what I was going to do with the part. Mike's favorite horror film of all time is Lake Mungo, an independent Australian horror film.
Answer me this. When did you two know that it was beyond a professional relationship? When did you...
That happened off-set. One of the things that infuriated me to no end was how professional Mike was on set. Because I was like, I was feeling it pretty early on. But he was just like, no, at work, nothing. Just like, so in retrospect, like, that's how you know, like, it's a good man, right? But at the time, I was like,
Hey, what's up, bro?
hello? I was in my late 20s. Like, it was the peak of Kate. So it was very surprising to me that it wasn't working.
In my defense.
Yeah, Mike, you got some splaining to do.
In my defense. There were 2 factors to that. One was she was clearly out of my league. I mean, clearly and inarguably, like, no. Like, that wasn't a real thing to think would happen. And it was my first real movie that we were working on together. It was Oculus.
Okay.
And I was living my days terrified of messing up the movie.
Oh yeah, you're in your head about the
Yeah.
film. You're just tunnel visioned.
And so, to be perfectly honest, I just didn't notice any of the vibes because between
completely
thinking,
oblivious.
yeah, utterly oblivious.
I've always
Yeah,
said I'm very subtle.
yeah, you're
Hard
very
to
subtle.
pick up.
Yeah. And then after we wrapped, then it was like, oh, hello.
And it was like right away there was so much talking.
Yeah.
Which, like, to me, it was like I was ready to, like, see what was going on there. But the nights we would just spend discussing things, I was like, oh, it's done.
Yeah, you're like, I'm in. I'm locked in.
I'm locked in. we sort of bet on that when we
Yeah.
did Hush, because the two things were separate, right? We knew we liked to work on the same type of things, and we respected each other as artists and thought each other was talented. And we knew that the personal relationship was really cool, and something very unique was happening there. At the time, the two of us were just like, should we see if the peanut butter and the chocolate are good together? Like, what if delicious?
And that's the risk on that. When you're working on a movie and in a co-writing capacity alone can be enough to completely obliterate friendships and marriages.
Yes.
Everything, all together.
Everything.
Yeah.
But then you add to that the kind of director-actor dynamic, and it's a movie that we both created for Kate. You do that in kind of a crucible without resources or time. You know, it was like, this is either going to cement us forever, or this is the end. You know, we're never going to speak to each other after this. And when we wrapped the movie and finished it, I loved working with her so much.
Yeah, it was life-changing.
And I loved that we would have these incredibly intense creative days on set together.
Yeah. It seems like you two are very open with open feedback, candor, how you communicate. How did you get to that in a relationship with each other, but also working on projects together?
It's a rare thing now when I'm doing a project without Kate.
Yeah.
Or
vice versa.
Vice versa, although Kate's doing some projects this year, which are really exciting, where she's going off to do it on her own. But it's really neat because it puts me in a place where I can support her in a co-parenting way. And that's a really wonderful opportunity to be like, yes, I've got this. I've got the kids, I've got the house. You need to go do what you do so well and like burn that incredible kind of firecracker energy that you have. And I'm just here to root you on.
There are moments where he believes in something strongly and I believe in something strongly, and they're at odds with each other. And when you are parenting, when you're co-parenting or when you're in a marriage, there is a certain amount of tenderness you need to approach conflict with like a gentleness, knowing that like these intimate relationships or these parental relationships have baggage, and you need to treat your partner with a certain amount of grace.
Right.
When you are artistically collaborating with somebody, you need to do the opposite. You need to get in there and punch on their firmly held beliefs to see if they hold up. Because very few people will do that to you, especially in Hollywood. They'll be like, that's a great idea. You are so funny.
And then you go outside and you're like, people are like, you got a booger in your face. And you're like, why didn't you tell me?
And so when I come up with an idea, what I do is I'm ready to bring it to Mike to be pressure tested, to be like, that sucks, this is what sucks about it, this is what's great about it, have you thought about this? And vice versa.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll read his first drafts and be like, I'm bumping on this, I'm bumping on this, I'm bumping on this. So they're different styles of communication for sure.
And Kate's the first person to read anything I'm writing. She's the first person to watch anything I'm cutting.
Yeah.
And it makes it for an interesting experience on set, because everybody else who kind of comes to be part of these things, we prefer to work together. So
Can
in
I tell
full
the story?
view of them.
Can I tell the story?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
This is a great example
Yes,
of
I
this.
wanna hear it.
We were shooting Midnight Mass.
Yes.
And there's a scene in Midnight Mass. I'm not going to say what they are yet. And it was the last shot of the day. And so I say the first line, which I think is, they sent the fairies away. And I just hear from offset, fairies. And I'm like, what? Fairies. And he goes, no, fairies.
Yeah.
Fairies.
Like berries.
Fairies.
Fairies.
Fairies. It was just like this, but screaming across the set at each other. And I do it again, and he go, cut, fairies.
Fairies.
Just screaming, fairies, 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 fairies. And it, back and forth, maybe 7 takes. And then you just hear him a beat, and he goes, fuck it, action. He just ran it through. And in the show, I say fairies and not
Fairies.
furries.
Berries.
Berries?
Like berries. Fairies.
Furries.
This continues to this day.
This is amazing.
Yeah. Most inspiring thing about Kate is the way she sees the world around her. She approaches every situation that she encounters with a certain amount of humor and grace and incredibly astute intellectual appreciation of what she's going into. She's also the funniest person I've ever met. I've never seen anybody so completely full of the best kinds of love. For our kids, you know, her parenting is astonishing. She's just the coolest person I know.
What makes an iconic horror film? What are the non-negotiables when it comes to this?
Sound design.
Sound design, yeah. Well, it's scary. You know, first of
Yeah.
all, and it's funny how many horror films don't hit that level, don't become really scary. I think what makes it iconic, though, it's not about the scares or the startles. It's about some kind of deep, frightening, challenging idea that will hold on to you a week later.
Yeah.
It's about the thing that'll keep you up at night just a little bit.
There has to be something that feels unique and first time. It doesn't have to be a whole like extra concept or a hat on a hat, but something that feels new.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'd add to that would be there has to be a balance to the horror. There has to be light to the darkness.
Yeah.
There has to be hope and empathy. And Stephen King would famously say that there's no horror without love. You don't write stories about the horrific evil. You write stories about people standing up to it and overcoming it. And that's what makes it iconic. That's what makes it endure.
Mike Flanagan.
You mentioned the Exorcist reboot, right, coming
Yeah.
2026. What's your thought about working on a cult classic?
I'm terrified of it. And I think the Exorcist, the original Exorcist, is a movie that cannot be improved upon. I made the sequel to The Shining,
Yeah.
and I had the same feeling of I'm stepping into the shadow of this movie. I'm never gonna approach its greatness.
Yeah.
I think with The Exorcist, it's been 50 years since that movie was made.
Wow.
And I think it was the scariest movie of all time when it came out. People were lined up around the block and fainting in the theater.
Yeah.
I think what scares us as people and as a society has changed so dramatically in half a century that there's an opportunity to tell a new story that can be that scary again. I just have to figure out how the hell to do that.
Yeah.
I'm incredibly excited about it. I'm intimidated by it, and I'm appropriately very scared of it.
He's in the right headspace to be intimidated and to look at the mountain he's going to climb with respect and awe, and he wants to rise to the challenge. But the idea is you're already, the very first popcorn kernels popping are fantastic.
And Kate, you had mentioned Mike has made space for you as an actor. How would you describe that actor today?
This is a difficult question because it's hard to do without sounding egotistical or vain, but I'm very proud of the work I've put in to be a more grounded, authentic actor. I don't approach my job with fear anymore. I approach it with creativity and curiosity more than anything else.
Yeah.
Mike ignited in me not only what became my sense of self, he kind of guided me to the door that I walked through. And Mike allowed me into the space so I can stay on set. I'm allowed to see playback. I'm allowed to see how the set works. And to me, that level of inclusion created confidence.
Yeah.
Realizing that I'm a small part of a big machine.
Yeah.
And that all I need to do, truly, is show up on time and be prepared. That, I think, is more rare in this industry than talent. Talent you can find anywhere in LA, at any restaurant. At least 50% of the waiters are talented. And I know because I waited tables for 10 years and I waited tables with some great actors. If you can consistently be a strong collaborator who is professional and a joy to work with, that's what you can bring to this industry on top of your talent. And Mike, without preaching at me, helped me realize that. Now I'm available to be exactly who I am on set. That energy radiates. Truly, it comes down to the fertile soil of Mike Flanagan. Hey, you want to go make out?
Yes, I do.
Thank y'all so much for stopping by, and super excited about the future projects that you both have in the works.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
We're
Thank
gonna
you.
go make out.
Yeah.